Hey, thanks for being here. A few videos ago, I made a video on how I value oil tanker companies uh, and why I value them in that way. If you're interested in that, I would recommend checking it out. Today, I'm going to be talking about specific oil tanker companies, and these are some of the companies that you guys requested. So I'm going to be kind of comparing them and sharing some of my observations and also how I value them specifically. Yeah. So let's get started. Excuse me. We're going to be talking about these companies: Nordic American Tankers, Scorpio Tankers, DHT, Teekay Tankers, Euronav, Diamond S Shipping, and Frontline. So how I'll be rating these companies today. I'm going to start with net asset value, one of the things I place a big emphasis on. That is the assets, primarily the value of all of the ships in that company, subtracted with all of its long-term liabilities, and we'll divide that by all of the shares in the company outstanding. The second thing I'll be valuing them on is dividends, and there are some patterns I'll be discussing with this metric. If you're like me and you like to get paid to hold a company, metric number 2 might be quite important. Third is the fleet age of the ships. If we have a very old fleet, the fleet age is going to be relevant because if the company wants to remain competitive and have the same fleet size that it has now, it's going to have to think about replacing those ships, and oil tanker ships aren't particularly cheap. So replacing those ships costs money. The second thing is that the older that those ships are, the more expensive they become to operate. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of which is maintenance. If there's anything that goes wrong in the ship, it needs to be repaired. And second of all, there's surveys. So the older the ship gets, the more surveys have to be done, and those become exponentially more expensive the older that ship. And the frequency of those surveys increases over time as they get older too. The fourth is debt. So this is kind of maybe like a risk metric. If it's got a high amount of debt, that company is going to be more risky than a company with low debt, especially during downturns in the market when they could face share dilution or even bankruptcy. So let's start with everybody's favorite company. I find this company very interesting. Nordic American Tankers. It is a crude oil tanker company. They specialize in Suezmax tankers. The reason I find this company interesting is that at one point in the year they were trading as much as $9 a share. They kind of captivated the most people, I suppose, compared to all of the other companies that we're talking about today. So right now, their net asset value, they're trading about $3 a share, and that's actually worth about what the share price is right now. So to me, I feel Nordic American Tankers is fairly valued. That wasn't the case earlier in the year, but now it is. So the company right now seems fair. Their average fleet age, however, they are very old. They have, of the companies I've looked at today, they have the oldest average fleet age. That is 12.2 years, so about 12 years old. Remember, what this means for their fleet means that they're going to have higher survey costs in the coming years, and that also means if they want to remain competitive, they're going to need to replace some of those ships. I do know that Nordic American Tankers, I believe they've ordered 2 new ships this year, and those will be coming in the coming years. So that fleet age is likely to come down because of those new ships. Something to keep into consideration. One thing I do like about Nordic American Tankers is their high variable dividend. So what this means is that during good times, they're going to pay more of their profit out as a dividend. And that contributes to a more stable share price. You may not be able to see that in Nordic American Tankers because they have gone there right now. They're trading a third of their 52-week high, right? but you will see that in some of the other companies by the end of this video, I think. They do have a low amount of debt. So during extended down periods in the market, which we are likely to see with COVID and reduced oil demand, they'll likely be able to survive. Euronav is, in my opinion, one of the outliers in the oil tanker industry. Their net asset value, they're worth about $14.30 per share. Right now, they're trading at about 50% of NAV, well below what their assets are worth. Their average fleet age is kind of in the middle of some of their peers. It's about 8.5 years. So at some point, they will need to consider buying new ships to supplement their fleet if they want to maintain their fleet, right? They have a high variable dividend, so during the good times, they're paying out incredible dividends, and that has contributed to some of their share price stability. Their debt is quite low, so during extended downturns in the market, Euronav will also likely be able to survive. By the way, Euronav is also a crude oil tanker company, and they have varying, I believe, the types of tankers. They have different kinds of tankers, unlike NAT, which specializes only in Suezmaxes. DHT is also a crude oil tanker company. Their net asset value, what I think they're worth, is about $6.50 a share. Right now, they are trading at about 75% of that, so they're worth 3/4. Their average fleet age, kind of like Euronav, 8.5 years, very similar. They're kind of middle of the roadish on their fleet age. So at some point, like their peers, they're going to need to replace them. Their dividends, they're highly variable, so that has contributed to some share price stability. And last, their debt is quite low, so DHT is probably going to be all right during extended downturns. Oh, one more thing about DHT, they specialize entirely in VLCC crude carriers. So kind of like NAT, which only specializes in Suezmaxes, while DHT only specializes in VLCCs. Frontline, they have a crude and product tanker fleet. Their net asset value, they are, according to this metric, worth about $6 a share, which is about 90%. So like NAT, I feel like Frontline is trading at about fair value right now. However, they do have an extremely young fleet, unlike NAT. So it is about 5.5 years. That means that their expenses, as far as surveys and maintenance, is going to be quite low. Their dividends, highly variable, so that has contributed to some share price stability compared to some of its peers. But they have a high amount of debt. So if we do see extended down periods in the market, this company is a little more risky, and they may dilute shareholders, or they could even go bankrupt under extreme circumstances. Teekay Tankers. I'm going to say some interesting things about this company. I didn't know much about this one, so I'm kind of glad that whoever brought this up did. Teekay Tankers is a crude, a product, and a LNG, liquid natural gas tanker company, which is kind of different than some of it's kind of an outlier among some of its peers. Their net asset value, they're worth 27 per share based on this metric. And right now they're trading at 1/3 of this metric. They're absurdly cheap. Their average fleet age, however, is quite old. They're 11.5 years. They're going to need to replace some ships. Their maintenance costs going up, right? They do not pay a dividend, and this likely has contributed to their poor share price compared to some of their peers. Their debt, however, is low, and during down periods, and in the last couple of quarters, they paid off a significant amount of that debt. So during down periods in the market, they're going to be okay. One thing really interesting about TK, though, is that right now, the amount of cash that this company has on hand, at the price that shares of this company are trading for, they could literally buy every single share of their company with the amount of cash that the company has on hand, assuming that the share price wouldn't go up as they purchase them. But it just kind of blows my mind how undervalued this company is, TK. So after having done some research, FYI, and this is not investment advice, make your own decisions. I will likely be opening a position on this company. Scorpio Tankers, their net asset value is about $21.50 per share. One thing I have done a little more research on this company compared to some of the other ones. This company owns something called scrubbers on every single one of its ships. And this net asset value doesn't account for the value of those scrubbers. So I don't know what those things are worth. If you don't know, there's something called IMO. It's kind of like an international, I don't know what it stands for, International Maritime something. But what they do is they regulate oil tanker companies. Essentially, they're regulating emissions of these oil. If you don't know, oil tankers, they're highly pollutive. They produce massive amounts of CO2 and some other garbage in the air because they use high sulfur fuel. And what Scorpio Tankers has done is they've invested in these scrubbers. And what that does is it takes out some of the pollutants from their emissions that they would produce. Instead of throwing it in the air, it throws it in the water. So as to the how great that is for the environment, I don't know, but it allows this company to pass these regulations. And what that means is that at some point they're going to be able to burn this cheaper, shittier fuel compared to their peers. So these scrubbers will have value in the long term. For now, it doesn't mean much because the price of fuel is so low because of the COVID and the oil situation. But over time, I think that these scrubbers are going to be valuable. Another thing that's interesting about Scorpio Tankers is they have a very, very young fleet. The youngest fleet of all tankers. They are a product tanker fleet, a little bit different than the last ones that I mentioned. They're exclusively product, but their ships are extremely young. They do pay a dividend, but unlike some of their peers, the dividend is fixed at 10 cents. So it's not variable, it's not based on their profits. But this is probably for good reason, because if you look at the last column, they have a high amount of debt. So this company is well positioned to do better in good times, but it is more riskier in bad times. And if you think about the environment we're in, where there is likely low oil demand and we are in COVID lockdowns and whatnot, this company is one of the more riskier ones. But if we get through this company is able to survive, it's going to be well positioned. What do we have next? Oh, Diamond S Shipping. Their net asset value, $18.70 a share. Right now, they are trading at 30% of their net asset value. Absurdly cheap. Their average fleet age, 10.5 years. So they're a little bit older-ish. I'd say kind of middle of the road, but they're getting up there, yeah. We'll just say that they're older-ish fleet, yeah. They don't pay any dividends, and you may notice that there might be a correlation between the NAV and those dividends, yeah. They don't have much debt, so during down periods in the market, Diamond S is going to be able to survive. I believe Diamond S, out of all of the companies that I talked about, is the lowest in terms of net asset value. And they are also, like Scorpio Tankers, exclusively this is wrong. Diamond S Shipping is not only a product. I just remembered this. They are not only a product tanker company. I believe that they also own some Suezmaxes. So this is wrong in this slide, by the way. They so they're kind of a mix. They own crude and product. Oh, and so we'll end this video, and you can kind of use all of these metrics to compare these companies. Let me go to the full screen. And let's talk a little bit again about some of the correlations that I've noticed. First of all, if you look at the young fleet in the second column, any of the companies that have the green check mark, meaning they have a young fleet, they also have high debt. So Frontline, Scorpio Tankers, more risky companies, but they are probably more poised to do in good, or they're better positioned to do well in good times, right? Some other things that you may notice is that TNK and DSSI and the well below category, or well below NAV category, on the left, I have labeled them as cheap. This means they're extremely below NAV. But you will also notice that this correlates to the dividend, right? So if you look in the third column, these companies, they don't have that high dividend, so their share prices tend to be less stable in bad times. And if you look at their charts recently, they have not done particularly well. And last thing I guess I would mention in this is that one of the greatest outliers, if you're comparing all of these companies, would probably be Euronav. They're trading well below NAV. They don't have the youngest fleet ever, but they kind of have a medium-ish fleet. They have a high dividend, and they have low debt. So Euronav is probably, according to these metrics, they're probably one of the better companies to look at. But I would encourage you to look at all of these things, compare all of these metrics, and think about which company is right for you and your risk tolerance. If you have any questions, post some comments below. And again, if you found this information useful, go ahead and give me a like. I would greatly appreciate that. Until next time, see you later.